those of you who read my blog this week understand that our speaker, Matt Norman, he inherited a really successful business from his father, who inherited it from his father. And it's iconic in the fact that it's a Dale Carnegie business. Who's heard Dale Carnegie, right? This is a very rare book. This book was given to me by my friends at Dale Carnegie. I spoke at one of their international conventions. And this book was written and inscribed by Dale Carnegie in 1937. It's one of my cherished possessions from my professional life. But what's really cool about this thing, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is still being published, and it looks like this. This is still the most successful business title today for Simon & Schuster. So Matt Norman inherited that opportunity, that burden. Now, I use the word inherited not to mean that his dad gave him the business. He's buying it, right? But there's a piece of inheritance that I really like, which means he received the genetic character, both of his father and his grandfather, but also of the Dale Carnegie business. Matt's also a prolific blogger. I'm going to encourage you to take a look at Norman Views, which is his blog. We'll send a reminder out after the meeting about what that is. And also, his Twitter handle is @MattNorman. So if you like what you heard here, you can tweet that out and mention the Good Leadership Breakfast. But before I introduce Matt, I just wanted to say also, he's raising 6-year-old boys. Anybody in the room raise 6-year-old boys? Yeah, that amazing amount of energy that takes, and to role model that. So I'm really, really excited to introduce to you to someone I think is an absolutely wonderful leader. He would not tell you that he was a 40 under 40 winner. He would not tell you that his firm has been named the best places to work 4 years in a row, and he will not tell you that they've had the highest growth inside Dale Carnegie of North America over the last 2 years. Please join me in welcoming Matt Norman. You're welcome. Here you go.
Okay, so I began my career, as I said, with Accenture in downtown Minneapolis at a time when things were more predictable. I took the bus every day to work. That schedule was very predictable, and just like the predictability of my schedule, the stock market predictably rose every quarter. Planes and backpacks didn't explode. And I knew what I had to do when I had to do it to continue to grow in my career path. And I realized shortly after deciding to go to an internet startup company, just as the economy was starting to turn down, and as I was pursuing a girl on the East Coast that I wanted to marry, that life wasn't as predictable as I thought it would be. I'll never forget sitting in a conference room at this internet company where I was now leading a team. And as I was speaking, my insecurities and negative self-talk started to enter into my mind as I got tense and my thoughts were cloudy. The reason for that was that this company I worked at, it was an exciting and fun culture. It was fast-moving. We were innovative. We were on the Inc. 500 fastest growing companies list. But it was also a culture that would eat you alive if you showed weakness. People in the company would calculate their words very carefully in meetings, and you were constantly considering your political alliances within the organization. And it was beginning to consume me as I tried to lead within this organization. And in the middle of this meeting, as I was getting tense, I froze. I couldn't keep speaking. I had the floor, everybody was looking at me, I had to get up and leave the room, acting like I was choking on something. And that day began my terror of public speaking. I would hide in my office with my door closed and the lights off for fear that I might be asked to have to speak at a meeting. Our chief operating officer had a habit of walking around the office before he would go into important meetings to grab someone from the middle leadership group to come into the meeting with him and help present something, often so that you could be the fall guy if things didn't go well. And I would hide. I would hear him leave his office, and I would know his schedule, and I would hide in my office. I could barely drive my car to the Dale Carnegie course I decided to take at that time because of the amount of anxiety I had associated with having to speak. This traumatic event that I had in an organization that valued self-reliance and power in its pursuit of business results taught me that organizational leadership, organizational culture is personal. That experience formed in me a desire, a deep desire, to try to create and be a part of organizational culture that builds people up and makes them stronger and treats them like human beings. You may wonder why I decided to take a Dale Carnegie course because of my fear of public speaking. It may be obvious from Paul's introduction that it was because of the fact that my grandfather got into the business in 1969. And growing up, I would describe my perspective of my grandfather and my father as admiration, not aspiration. I really admired the relationships that they had. Some people in this room have mentioned that they know my father or my grandfather. They're well respected in the community and have healthy relationships, and I admire that. But I didn't aspire to getting into that business, partially because I think deep down I was afraid I couldn't live up to it, but also because I always viewed coaching people on their relationships and their communication skills as frankly kind of unsophisticated, kind of quaint. I wanted to be a finance major and go into technology. I thought that was cool and edgy. And what I realized is that as I've gotten older is that sustaining productive relationships is actually not very quaint. It's actually pretty complicated. And my original assumptions were way too simplistic about what it takes to improve relationships and improve the way that we communicate. I remember last fall, I was walking around Lake Harriet with a mentor of mine, a trusted mentor. We were talking about business, and I explained to him that I was working, a challenge I was trying to solve was how to increase the income levels of people on our team. And I was experiencing a lot of stress about how to find ways to help our people continue to grow their income. And he stopped as we were walking around the lake, and he looked at me, he said, "Matt, it's not your responsibility. You've created a place for your people to be successful. It's up to them to grow their income." I said, "Yeah, I know, I get that." He stopped, he looked at me, he said, "Matt, it's not your responsibility." And I started crying right there. Walking around Lake Harriet, I started weeping. I realized that in my pursuit of trying to create a culture where people could thrive and be their best, I had assumed the responsibility for myself. I had taken on that responsibility, and it was wearing me down. It was breaking me down. I realized that trusted mentors, like my friend John, who was walking with me that day, help us to see ourselves for what we really are and who we really are. Trusted mentors help us to see ourselves for who we really are. And I needed to see some of the responsibility that I was taking on. I've also taken on responsibility for refreshing our brand. I have a personal mission to strengthen the brand that has been so successful in the Carnegie organization for 100 years, to help our clients, our market, our own team to see that this is a relevant, important brand and effort that we do every day. And to do that, in January, I started writing a blog, as Paul mentioned. Now, I asked my wife in January if she would edit my blog, because partially I wanted to do it more on my personal time. I didn't have the confidence yet to consider my blog part of my professional life. I thought it would just be something that I kind of did on the side. And also I thought it would be a way for us to share kind of some of my thinking. And my wife is one of the smartest, sharpest, best critical thinkers that I know. I admire her so much, and so grateful that she would read this blog, and for a while it was really fueling my ego, because she would read the blog and say, wow, now I'm realizing what you do at work, and this matters, this is really cool, and this is really fun to get your insights. Until one night, I remember, it was 11 o'clock at night, and we were standing in our bathroom, and she said, your blog is getting in the way of our marriage. And I was defensive. I said, what are you talking about? She said, Matt, we've spent the last hour editing your blog, and it's a Saturday night. I wanted to go to bed earlier. There were things that I wanted to do. She said, I feel like we are more business partners than we are lovers. I was defensive in the moment, yeah, but you said this was fun, and it was a way to connect. The next morning, I called a trusted friend, Paul Botts, and I asked him to help me think of ways to better structure the blog. How do I get this done every week without affecting my personal life so much? And he introduced me to an editor that fits my personality perfectly. My wife was grateful. Now she reads my blog every week because she wants to. And our marriage has been restored. And the blog has been blended into what I do professionally and is not impacting me personally in negative ways the way it was. It's helped me to realize that leadership is not so much about what we do. Leadership comes from being who we need to be. And sometimes we need a network of resources to help us to be who we need to be when we need to be there. In June, I needed to be at a meeting in Denver for Dale Carnegie leaders from across the world, including the global executive team from Dale Carnegie at this meeting. And I presented and demonstrated a client conversation to this group of leaders around the Dale Carnegie current point of view on leadership development, succession planning, and employee engagement. When I sat down next to the global CEO of the organization after this presentation, which, by the way, for me, because of my history having anxiety around public speaking, was creating a lot of anxiety in me to have to present to my peers and the executive global leadership team at Dale Carnegie. And I'll never forget sitting down, Paul was there, sitting down next to the global CEO of this organization, of our organization, and he whispered to me, he said, that was a tour de force. And I'll never forget those words. That presentation capped 18 months of me leading leaders from around the Dale Carnegie world in doing research to understand from our clients the trends in organizations related to the people side of organizations, leadership development, succession planning, and employee engagement. And from that research that we did in those areas, I co-authored a paper talking about the Dale Carnegie current point of view on these trends, an effort to reduce the quaint perception that can sometimes come with an old brand and increase the relevance of our brand. And if you're interested in seeing that paper, just email me. I'll send you a copy of the paper, by the way. It's just our point of view on leadership. But what I realized from that experience is that I was able to lead that global team of leaders and present to my peers and the executive team because over time I had begun to develop an accrued sense of confidence. And my confidence has not come from a false bravado or an empty sense that I can do anything, because I know I can't. I've had a lot of really dark moments. My confidence in leading that team came from a passion to be living out this mission of being a third generation in the business, a passion to make our brand relevant today, and it came from the self-awareness and the ability to regulate my negative self-talk that so often damages my self-confidence. It helped me to realize that confident leadership comes from the realization, the relationship that we have about ourselves. My experiences in leadership development, personally, have changed many of the assumptions that I had about leadership. When I first started at Accenture, I assumed everything was going to be very predictable. And many of my assumptions have changed, which is why Paul Batz, Paul Dominski, myself, and others decided to research over the last 18 months how leaders grow today. We interviewed leaders to find out how they succeeded through the unpredictable, messy journey of leadership, through the challenges that they face. And I realized in these interviews that my experience is not very unique. We found that leadership development is more than predictable formulas, like 70-20-10, which you may be familiar in the 1980s. It was said that 70% of what helped leaders to grow were experiences, 20% was mentoring, and 10% is traditional books, courses, and study. Sounds very clean and tidy, doesn't it? The reality is that leadership is more personal than that. 4 personal accelerants consistently surfaced in our research. 1, culture. 2, mentors. 3, networks. And 4, confidence. These 4 personal accelerants were what helped leaders to thrive and succeed through challenges, and they are all very personal. I've experienced personally how culture can eat us up or build us up. I've experienced how mentors can improve our self-understanding. I've experienced, and the research shows, that networks help us to deliver and build, they help us to build our capacity to deliver our best work. Networks help us to build our capacity to deliver our best work. and confidence accrues as we learn about ourselves and as we enjoy what we find out about ourselves. So I wish I could be more consistently at the Good Leadership Breakfast. I enjoy it every time I come. The reason I don't more consistently come, Paul knows this, is that for over 10 years, every Friday morning, a group of men meets to run around Lake Harriet at 5:30 in the morning. And afterward, we sit down for 1 hour together. And in that hour, we discuss books about faith and marriage and parenting. We pray together. We talk openly about our struggles, about our feelings, with each other. In many ways, this group of men, which my brother-in-law and partner sitting right there is part of this group of men that's faithfully been meeting every week, is the embodiment, for me, the type of personal growth that we need in order to successfully grow through this increasingly unpredictable, messy world that we live in. I'm grateful for these men, for that guy. I'm also grateful this morning to miss the second half. I ran with them, but I left and came here. I'm grateful to be with this group of leaders that are aspiring for goodness, to be with my friend and mentor, confidant, Paul Botts. Maureen Tubbs, I see over there, a colleague of mine. I'm grateful for the culture that we're building. This is a difficult and ongoing journey for all of us, for me, for all of us, to grow as leaders. Let's continue to strengthen our culture, be and find trusting mentors, be and become a part of networks that help each other be where we need to be when we need to be there, and develop our own true confidence and the confidence of people around us through greater self-awareness of the challenges that we've moved through and our ability to meet the ones that will come. If we do that, we will experience growth as leaders in our personal lives and for our organizations. It's an honor to be able to just be open as a group. I remember last Good Leadership Breakfast, listening to Kurt Kwan stand up here and talk about his own challenges and successes in his journey as a leader. And I believe that one of the great values that Paul and Heidi and Melinda have created in this breakfast is the willingness to, as leaders, be honest with each other, to be vulnerable and talk about both the challenges and the successes of growing as a leader. So it's an honor to be a part of this process. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll welcome back up Paul.
Thanks, man. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You didn't look so scared today. That Dale Carnegie stuff must work. Now's, I promised you the chance that you're going to get the opportunity to do a little work on your own. So here's the discussion question. Matt shared a very personal example of a situation that really caused him to grow. You have 10 minutes now to talk a little bit about the situations that caused you to grow. Ready, set, go. Thanks for investing yourself in the table conversations. It's part of our tradition now. I have a few questions I'm going to ask Matt Norman based on some of the things we heard earlier. But before we do that, go ahead and sit down here, Matt. Before we do that, I just want to let you know, many of you downloaded the executive summary of the research project that we did we will also send out a link again, and you can get it off of our site, or you can get it. We'll make sure we can connect you to Matt Norman. But that research was called How Leaders Grow Today. Let's start with one of the places where you left off. How is your faith alive in your work today?
Yeah, my faith informs how I show up, I think, as a leader. And it also, I think, gives me a lot of insights. Last week, I was in Chicago. I just blogged at normanblogger.com. You can read what I just wrote this week about the conference I went to at Willow Creek in Chicago with Stephen, wherever you are. And we talked about, we heard a lot of great speakers and authors. And it really helped me think about leadership, I think, more effectively.
Good. Yeah, that Willow Creek conference is awesome. If you ever, if you want, you can watch it on YouTube. It's awesome. Okay, so you told us a pretty pointed story about you and your wife standing there in front of the mirror in the kitchen or in the bathroom. So what are you and your wife? You're raising these 6-year-old twins. What are you and your wife doing for fun?
That was the area that I scored the lowest on the on the wheel. Yeah, that we really have to be intentional, you know. So we try to schedule those priorities, to schedule date nights. And the other thing is, this is a word I borrowed from you, Paul, and that's blending. So we try to, you know, we try to enjoy and have fun talking about work-related things. The blog went to an extreme, but you know, we try to have fun in doing the day-to-day, sort of even mundane at times, parts of life.
Thanks. So you told us about the Friday morning runs. How else do you know, fitness is usually the lowest on the wheel for everyone. How do you make time for your fitness?
Yeah, that one again is just, for me, scheduling priorities. I've just declared that I just know I have to get up by a certain time in order to exercise and do the other things I need to do in the morning before 2 6-year-old boys start, you know, terrorizing the house. And, you know, it's the last 2 weeks are an example of 2 weeks where I've just been really tired and I haven't been able to wake up, and fitness took a notch down on the wheel. But it's a constant deliberative effort to try to schedule that priority.
I went on a long run last night. I ran into some of my friends, and I ended up eating a really huge brisket sandwich. I was like, that didn't work out the way I planned it to. So, father, grandfather, what did you learn from your father about how to run this business?
I learned that, I think, 2 things. One, that leadership and running a company is more about who you are than what you do. And second, my dad had a mantra, which was, and still is, do what's right. Do what's right. People would come to him and ask him for his opinion or his permission, and he would look at him and say, do what's right. And that way of empowering and setting the bar for goodness created the culture that our organization has.
My guess is he also told you to take a Dale Carnegie course when you had problems speaking too, right?
He was the first person I called. Yeah.
So what's your relationship today with your grandfather?
Yeah, it's amazing. Probably getting emotional here as I'm talking about it. Yesterday, I called my grandfather on the way to a client meeting in the morning and told him, we talked about this breakfast because I forwarded him your blog. And he just said, I'm proud of what you're doing. And it's that kind of relationship.
So let's think about the future. Several people brought their kids today who are in college or just recently out of college, which is awesome. You can do that in August, right? What advice do you have for these kids?
Yeah, I really believe in the research that we did and the 4 accelerants that we talked about. They're simple, but I really believe that all of us, whether we're starting our career or toward the end of our career, that we need to build and be a part of a culture that lets us be real, be authentic, and be healthy. And if we can't fix it, we should leave it. I really believe in finding mentors, often informal mentors, creating a sort of a, what did I call it the other day, a patchwork of mentors. And third, really making sure that we give and receive in mutually beneficial networks. And then fourth, that we are finding ways to build our confidence, and not bravado, but true confidence that comes from self-awareness and regulating the relationship that we have with ourselves that occurs inside our own head.
So final question, what are you going to do with the twins today?
My brother-in-law is in town right now. So my other brother-in-law, so Mike, who's right there, and I are going to take the twins out to my in-laws' house, which is south of Prior Lake, and we're going to try to enjoy the summer together.
7Fs, baby. That's right. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Please say thank you for Matt and Armin.
Thank you, everyone.